Perfect. Okay, yeah, I did. All right, perfect. What's going on, PW? How's the day so far, PW? Hopefully you close green today. For some, it was a little bit rough, but there was some plays to be made today. What's going on, KJ? What's going on, everyone? What's going on? Welcome in, welcome in. We'll try to keep it brief, so don't worry. And my phone just went off. Hey, Izzy, what's going on? Just noticing. Huh, interesting. There was actually some dark pool activity after hours on Nvidia and SPY. Okay, interesting. 116 mil print on Nvidia and 652 million print on SPY. Interesting. Okay. What's going on, Randy? Roku was definitely a big win today. That was a nice banger to end the day. That was definitely a saver into that close. Cause most of the day it was pretty hard to get into some moves here. A lot of different swings, if I would say, especially around the time of that Fed minutes that happened. Hey Carolyn, how's it going? All right, so let's take a look real quick. At futures are actually up quite a bit. I didn't expect that type of move overnight here so early, but we'll see what happens by morning. We do have jobless claims tomorrow. Tomorrow is Thursday, so we do have jobless claims. So far, the market is digesting the Fed minutes as bullish for the moment. As we saw, we pretty much just ripped after the Fed minutes and we had a nice little uptrend right into close. That helped a lot. We saw that Roku play. That played out pretty much textbook right there. That was a beautiful breakout right there into the close. And then we also had a nice pop on Tesla into close. It just so happened that it gave back all its gains. So that was a little bit unfortunate. Tesla's going to be continue to be on watch. I'll just glance over the chart because I know that everyone wants to see Tesla every day for that matter. But pretty much what I was watching for most of the day, and I think if I get down to the 2 hour, probably it's a little bit better here. Or did my resistance line just change? I think it just dropped down just a bit. All right. So as we pretty much saw, we were in pretty much most a wedge for the most of the day, and this wedge would just continue to just progress through the entire day. And that's why it was like that. And so as we continue to chop, this is when we actually saw this wick down was when we saw the Fed minutes on S&P futures here. We had that wick down and then we just ripped right up. And as you see right now, it looks a little bit like a rising wedge right now. If I were to plot this out, and that's the scary part. We have a little bit of a rising wedge action here. And I'll probably put this in a bright color so you see what I'm actually talking about. I don't think that's really a bright color, but I'll stick with yellow. So as you see, you have your little support level there, and then what's actually forming right now is the resistance level. So that is not a nice formation that we are going into right now, because as you see, you just had that red candle on S&P futures here, and that's going to end up breaking down. So you do want to see where we ended up breaking out from. We want to see the support hold. We're likely going to test this support now that we broke out of that wedge. We'll end up retesting resistance on this rising wedge. And then that's where we want to see basically what's going to happen. Are we going to continue to chop sideways? Or are we going to get back a decline in which we give up the gains that we ended up having from today? And that's the price action that I'm going to be looking for come tomorrow morning. Because that's going to be pretty much the telling story. Now, if I zoom back out, and this is pretty much what I wanted to kind of emphasize here, is as long as even though we are pretty much pushing higher, What I don't particularly like, and I'm going to remove the line so you get a better image of what I'm going to be looking at, is that as you see here, when we had this little head and shoulders action prior in this wedge, and we did have this little zigzag formation as we do have right now, that was not a good sign, in which you could say this is a little bit of a bear flag, if you want to say that, because this was not a good sign. And as you see, we just fell off a cliff right there. That was not a good sign. And so it actually looks like the same type of formation that's actually forming right here. And that's what I'm hoping doesn't happen. So the resistance levels that I'm watching to hopefully get over is 43.73, and then also to push beyond 43.83, which is a coincidence there. That's only about 10 points apart. But we want to hold above 437 for bulls. That's really, I think, the key level. If we drop back down here below and chop around this 436 area, which is around 4360 to 4369, you don't want to chop in with this in this area, having that rising wedge that we have. And so bears are pretty much looking for this right under 4318. If we get back under 4318, that's not going to be good. So I think we are still in the middle of the pack between bulls and bears right now. It's still a battle for the most part. Are we trending towards bull territory? Of course we are, because we're approaching that 436, 437 level, and that's what you want to see hold by tomorrow morning. Now, granted, I'm not really expecting too much of a move following jobless claims tomorrow, but sentiment wise, that's where we want to see the overnight reaction following the Fed minutes. Are there going to be follow up statements come tomorrow morning? What's going to be the sentiment after that entire set Fed minutes that we have today? How is it going to be digested overnight? And that's what I want to be looking at for tomorrow. So pay attention to the news tomorrow morning. I expect some kind of feedback, some kind of response from someone in which that's going to pretty much impact the markets negatively or positively. All right. But bull territory, I want to see this get over 436, 437 and hold here, as we are over 436 right now. But if you're a bear, you basically want to see this below 432, 431. And if I'm not mistaken, Avery actually had the bear count. He was looking at 429 if bears get control, in which we would lose 431 on this, pretty much inside this wedge. So as far as S&P, like I said, 436, 437, you hold, and we continue to be bulls. If you're a bear, you basically want to see us under 432, 431, and then we go as low as 429. Okay. Now NASDAQ, pretty much almost a similar scenario here. We got that nice push that we saw this morning. I did mention we want to hold that support. We ended up holding that support overnight. We got the push, I would say the gap up that we wanted by morning. And so the trend continues. As we've seen, we get the daily decline and then we get the overnight gap up. So that continued into today. Although we didn't necessarily get a decline today, we did get a nice recovery. I do want to see how we're going to end up breaking the overnight gap ups in the coming days, because I don't think that's going to necessarily be a good one. In which, if market sentiment goes bearish, then that overnight gap up is likely going to pretty much disappear at some point in time here. We're going to break that trend. But we had a nice push here. We want to see this get right over this level of 14,858. And so once we get over that level, that'll be a nice push right into the resistance of this bear flag. That's still intact for the most part. So keep in mind, the bear flag is still intact. I do want to see us get over the resistance of this bear flag, which will invalidate the pattern for the most part. But again, that level that I'm looking at is right around this level here, in which we end up breaking over 14,860 is the ballpark number. That'll give you a better idea. All right. So we'll likely see that. I would expect that gap up to get right over to that resistance level by morning, and we'll see how we react to that level, as we are going to be expecting S&P to be gapping up as well, and we'll see if we hold or not by morning, and that's going to be the key. All right. But that covers S&P and NASDAQ for the most part. If you guys saw Tesla today, we pretty much chopped for the entire day on this candle for them, these two candles for the most part. Now, if I zoom in, and I'll pretty much show you the pop that I was watching into close here, which was a beautiful little pop, was right here. I actually got into this. It was pretty much more so, I want to say, I treated like a lotto position, but we had a nice little pop in which we broke right out into the end of the day here on Tesla. So I did get in once we just popped over. My fill was right around, close enough to around the mid 810 mark. I got in and it popped right up. I wanted to take profits at that point. I knew I should have. I didn't. So I ended up exiting right around here on the drop back of 812. I got I got out green. I didn't get out with as much profit as I could have, but that was the risk that I took into the close. And it was just a shame that Tesla ended up giving back all its gains. But we will continue to see this hold its levels. I expect this to at least hold 800 at the very least, which I would say is like your max pain level. So I expect 800 to hold for the most part, despite all this pretty much up and down sideways action that we're seeing. But 820, 830 is pretty much that goal level that we're looking at. I have about 821 as my target up here. I would say 821, 822 will be my target. And if I'm not mistaken, Dapper's target is still around the 830 level. So we'll continue to keep this one and monitor it into tomorrow. But that just wanted to point out what I was looking at into the close on that one. Another one that we're watching, and I pretty much want to get a larger time frame on this one. I can go to the 4 hour. Give us a nice little push on this one. I'm watching continuation on UPST. I do want to see it end up breaking this all-time high here of 346.54. So I want to see this one continue to make this push here. And then what I actually drew out here, and I'll probably go out to the daily to give you a nice little push here on the resistance, the up and under, I would say for the most part, is this resistance level. As we see, we trended right along it, up and under, up and under. And so I'm looking for this to end up getting a nice push right into that resistance level of near 365. It depends how quickly we push straight up or if we continue to go a little bit in a diagonal position. So between 365 to 370, we'll have to assess to see how fast and how much we push upward. But that 365 would be my low end target, 370 would be my high end target to hit this resistance level. And then at that point, we'll see if it gets to break over it. All right. But that's pretty much for UPST. That was a strong push that it made today. That was pretty quick out of the gate that it made this move here today. So we'll watch it for continuation tomorrow. There was a little bit of chatter on Facebook. I saw a little bit of flow that came in. I know it's actually being pumped on social media by maybe one or two people that are pretty much known. One being Trader Stewie. The other one is a little bit unknown. But they're all watching for this to break out here of this descending channel. And so we'll keep it on watch here. I know that the targets have been around the 330, 325 to 330 level. So once we get over that 325, then we're looking at 330. But I won't keep an eye on this until we get over that 325 level. If we continue to be stagnant here, then it's likely that we couldn't make another leg down. So 325, 330, that's the range that they're looking at. 330 is really the target that I've seen for the most part. All right. But again, draw the channel down. Let's see if we get a nice little candle breaking out of this tomorrow, and then we can target that 330 level if we do get clear skies. All right. Next one that's been on my radar, I actually had on my radar today. I'm pretty sure it's still on Dougie's radar and Avery's radar, was Netflix. So I am going to send an alert on this downtrend break here off of this rising wedge. I do believe that we have at least one more leg to go up here. So I'm going to see if this ends up breaking. I do want to see this get over this level of 632. So once we break over that 632 level, I will be in calls on Netflix tomorrow if we're able to get over the hump. And so I'll have my alert set on this one, but this is definitely one that's more so at the top of the watch list tomorrow. And so I'll set my alert. I'll probably call it out on live if I do enter a position here, and we'll see where this one goes. But I just wanted to point it out. I expect this to get a nice little push, at least one more leg up, and then it is possible that we end up breaking the rising wedge to chop sideways or end up declining at that point because we also do have a gap fill here at the bottom. All right. So that's one that's continued to be on the watch list. Another one that I'm watching for continuation, and I know that Tom is actually in his position. I believe he took some profits, if I'm not mistaken. But Zilla was one. I pointed out it yesterday. We tested that support level perfectly, and we got a nice push. We created a nice little gap also, which is a little bit concerning. It is possible that we end up filling that gap before the continuation. But we have a nice little inverted head and shoulders action that we're looking at. So it is likely that we get a nice push. And so I'm looking for this one to get a nice push beyond the level of 96. So above 96, we'll see a nice little continuation. And what they typically say is that once you get over the 90 level, the 100 mark is pretty much a magnet. So I will target a 100 mark here once we break over 96. All right. Another one that's on my watch list, another inverted head and shoulders, is Shopify. Shopify had a nice little inverted head and shoulders. I did get a nice little scalp on this one. That was very brief though, so I didn't even call that one out. But we did end up also, we actually wicked off of this gap. But I'm looking forward to fill if we end up breaking this neckline. And so that would give us a nice little fill up to 1435 and filling this entire gap. And then I was targeting this right into the range of about 1473 is the range that I was targeting this on for continuation if we get over that hump. But the low end target here is that 1435 in which we should get a nice push to complete that gap and break the neckline in the inverted head and shoulders. All right. So we'll continue to watch that one. I did point out LMT, and it's actually been a few days since I pointed this one out. It was on my Twitter. As you guys remember, this was pretty much a double play right here. We had inverted head and shoulders and a descending channel. We had a beautiful continuation. We already filled one gap in which I highlighted before. We completed that gap right around that 362 level. And so now we're already aiming towards breaking that recent high that we have here at 364.33. And we have one more gap that's going to be completed here. And so we'll enter that gap fill right around 365.36. Over that, we enter the next gap fill. And so I do expect this one to continue. This has been a strong move, a beautiful trendline support that you have going up. So if it continues to hold that trendline, this is definitely a nice risk reward. And definitely that support trendline would definitely be your stop loss if it does end up breaking it. So treat it as that. Other than that, next one I have is CRM. This one's a little bit similar to UPST in a sense that I'm watching for this to break over that high. So if we break over that high of 286.36, then it's likely that we're going to end up testing the resistance on this channel that I have drawn. So as you've seen, we had a beautiful ascending channel. You break that high again of 286.36, and we're going right up to the resistance level near 291. All right, 290 to 291. So I'm going to continue to keep that one on radar. It's actually slipped away from me these past 2 days, but it's now catching my attention as it gets close enough to that high. And so I will watch it. I'll probably send an alert on this one actually as well because I know that it's gotten away from me. So I'll send an alert on this one and I'll watch it. If it breaks over that high, then I know my target is to that resistance of this channel. All right. The other one, along with, I'm not going to show NVIDIA because I know that Avery pretty much called out that play and it's already made a decent sized move. But if we do get a continuation on AMD tomorrow, then NVIDIA is going to be the play that I watch, as in pretty much moving side by side in sympathy with it. But if we end up getting over this break of this 210, I want to say ballpark 211 for that matter, then that gap fill is going to be in play. So we'll end up filling that gap right over 214.19. We'll see a nice gap fill in which I saw most of the flow I saw was for about 210 to 215 calls. And so that 215 call will line up right into the gap fill that it is here. So this one's definitely going to be a runner if we do see continuation on AMD. And it is a high possibility that we see some type of gap up on AMD. And AMD and NVIDIA, I mean, will be a nice continuation move here right into that 215 mark. Other one that I was watching was Visa. This one actually had some nice call flow as well. Visa actually is making a nice little megaphone for that matter. And I'll actually show you pretty much what they were looking at. Let me see if I can get this pasted actually. All right, there we go. So I'll show you the price action of basically what they're looking at on this. As you see, you have basically your 5 waves here as is illustrated here on this right illustration. And I'll probably expand it so you get a bigger image of it. But as you saw, that little circle right there on that wave 5, that's where they bought up the dip, basically. And so there's a lot of 225 calls on this for tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow, but for end of the week. And so we'll watch to see the continuation on this one. I do expect that to get a nice little bump up. I don't expect a solid uptrend to go beyond, I want to say beyond 226, 227. But I do see this end up getting close enough to that 225 mark by the end of the week. Visa is not usually necessarily that big of a mover. But 225 is doable here. And so we'll watch for a nice little uptrend right into the middle of this megaphone. in which we get a nice uptrend. But I just want to illustrate pretty much where that buy zone was in terms of the pattern that we're looking at on this megaphone. All right, so that's another one. VXX, pretty much just a glance at this, we always should be looking at VXX because even though the fact, remember, we're still in the middle of the pack. Bulls are not in the clear, bears are not in the clear, but we're pretty much just getting a little bit of a falling wedge action that we have here, but we are still above this descending channel that I pretty much have outlined. All right. This one I actually pointed out. I actually screenshotted the chart right onto Twitter before our session here. But I'm watching right into the gap fill here. That'll be where I pretty much look to take my profits around 334.22. We'll continue to get right into the completion of this gap fill. But we'll see where this one continues to go beyond that gap fill. I know that Avery has a higher target for that matter. But if I was to look into higher time frames to a higher target, it will be right around this level that I'm looking to take profits, right around that 338 mark if we continue to break beyond this gap fill. So that one we'll be watching for continuation. I'm expecting some kind of either a sideways action, maybe a falling wedge type action in which we digest this breakout that we just had, because that was just a straight moon breakout into the close. So I expect a nice little pullback. If I were looking for a nice little support level to retest, it would be right around the 325 mark, in which that would be about decent $4 mark, $4 drop, which that is pretty much a healthy pullback for the stock because it is a very high volatile stock. As you see all these wicks going up and down on this one, it is very volatile. So this could wick down $4 and go right back up. All right. And then let me just see, the last ticker that I had was Zoom. I pointed this one out also. This was actually a beautiful move here today. I know that Avery pointed out to me. I couldn't get the fill fast enough on this one. This one just spiked right out of the gate. I didn't want to chase it. And so I'll be watching this one for a nice little continuation. If we get this break over this 267.50, then I will ride this right up to about 271. That'll be my continuation play there on this one. If we end up breaking 267.50, and I'll take my profit to 271, that'll be a beautiful scalp. But that's granted that we don't end up gapping up to the 271. So if it gaps up, I won't necessarily pay attention too much to it because it could chop sideways and then make a next leg up in the coming days here. So I won't look to necessarily short it, but I will look to see if it opens flat, then over that 267.50, I'll play it right up to 271. But other than that, that kind of wraps up the plays that I was looking at. DKS did moon today. Izzy, you are 100% correct. That was a beautiful move that you got out of DKS. I believe Dapper was actually mentioning it, if I'm not mistaken. I think he mentioned that. Nike, I know that I actually had a nice chart on Nike. Dapper was looking at it since the last time that I actually charted it. I actually had a nice little double bottom action here, and I think it looks a little bit better probably on the 2 hour. Yeah, it looks a little better on 2 hour. We had a nice little double bottom action here at the bottom, and I pointed that out. Ever since we've gotten that double bottom action, we broke the downtrend now, in which case we have pretty much clear skies. But what I would suggest is taking profits right around this level of 159. 159.09 would complete the gap fill. And as you see, this is a very large gap fill. So it is very likely that we end up filling that gap to 159.09, and then we get a retest of from the break of the downtrend. And in which case this resistance line right now will act as support now. Okay. So 159.09 will be where I take my profits on Nike, but it does have another about $3 move almost to that upside to fill this gap, and that'll be where I take the profits. All right. Really quickly, I'll take those two other ones, and then we'll wrap it up for the night. Someone pointed out Microsoft earlier. Microsoft actually had a decent move. I know that it gapped up. Actually, for Microsoft, it typically doesn't move as much as it did today. So I shouldn't say that was a decent move. It was a nice gap up that it had today. It actually held the nice bottom that we had here, in which I would say this is more so of a double bottom action here, right around that 292, that we had a nice little double bottom, in which we curled it right back up. And so it is a high possibility that we end up filling this gap if the market allows it, and we fill that gap right up to 299.07, and then it'll be left to determine if we get over that gap fill or not. I don't expect Microsoft to necessarily push beyond that 299.07 level, but that's left to be determined. If it breaks over 299, then my overall target is 305 on Microsoft. But we would definitely have to get over this entire gap fill, in which that would complete at 299.07. Okay. Really quick, one other one that you did mention was I'll peep Cody real quick and NSI. Wow. Not sure exactly what ticker this is, but and that's kind of why I looked at it. But definitely a nice little rounding bottom that you have. If I'm looking for a resistance level that I'm looking to identify, is right around this level. That would be my resistance level. Right around 31.44 would be where I find resistance on this, in which you could wick above, I would mean, and you can reach about 31.72 before this either continues to just blow off the top or we end up coming back down to form a handle. Okay, so my intermediate level right here to actually reach a firm resistance will be right around 31.44. However, you could wick up to this level of 31.72, and then what I would expect the retracement for a handle. Otherwise, you blow off the top and you pretty much blow off of this wick, which the high is 32.34. All right, so those two levels I'm watching. Other than that, that kind of wraps up the night. I did already go over Roku, by the way. I remember I actually pointed out Roku on the gap fill actually, and I'll just tell you the level real quick before I wrap up. I'm watching Roku up to 334.37 to complete the gap fill. All right. Other than that, Randy, definitely appreciate it. Appreciate it. We'll see what happens tomorrow with jobless claims. I think we're still in a little bit of a rough patch right now. I do want to see us get over. We are basically over the 436 level, but I want to see us hold that level and then get over 437, and then we should be making our way to clear skies to get a nice bull run here. If we don't end up holding 436, then I'm just hoping that we don't end up getting in a chop scenario again. If we're gonna flush, I'd rather just flush and just have it be done with. But we'll see how that plays out. I just don't want to see a chop zone again, as we've been seeing for most of the time, in which we just gap up and then just steady decline and pretty much bleeding out my eyes. All right. But other than that, a lot of names that I threw out there tonight. So we'll watch for continuations off of these massive moves today. But I think that wraps it up for tonight, guys. You guys have a good night, and I will meet you guys on live tomorrow. And we'll see what it is tomorrow, all right?